everybody. This is Eve Bliss. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel was originally dedicated to promoting a book that I wrote. It's called Follow. Actually, it's an ebook. You can find it on Amazon.com under the ebooks tab. And I just want to say, beforehand, there's some people that walk by in this video because I'm outside, if you will, at the park. So, there's some people that walk by. I apologize for any interruptions. But I wanted to do this video outside and kind of get outside and get a little grounded, if you will. But again, this channel was originally dedicated to writing a book or promoting a book that I wrote. It's called Follow, and it's an ebook. And the book really focuses on a holistic view of spirituality. Looking at spirituality from not just a psychological, so-called spiritual aspect, but also an earthly aspect as well. When we think of a human being, we should think of us as demigods. We're not just spiritual, but we're also earthly. And so, within the matrix environment, we're taught to embrace our spiritual, which is the ego, but to neglect our earthly, which is pushed into the unconscious mind. We call it the astral body in New Age literature, if you will. So I talk about the difference between that, and so I talk about how the various constructs of the matrix actually work to solidify, the conscious ego, which is the feminine energy, and the masculine unconscious mind, which is is a really sexual energy when you think about it. This kind of corresponds in Christian theology to the whore of Babylon. And Kundalini, what they call Kundalini in New Age literature. So I'll talk to you a little bit more in subsequent videos about what the Kundalini really is, why that's the sexual energy and that type of thing. But I won't focus on that so much right here. So there's four or five major aspects or constructs of the matrix that I focus on that solidify the ego in the unconscious mind. And so I look at media and entertainment, education, the familial structure, I look at religion, those are the four main ones that I look at, right? Education, media, entertainment, education, religion, the governmental structure. So those are the ones that I really focus on because they work to, which is what I would say, develop the ego or a false self. And so, like for example, if you're born into a family that's Jewish, then you'll be Jewish. If you're born into a family that's Christian, you'll be Christian. So it's a cookie cutter system, if you will, that they have going on here. And I talk about, for example, like let's take media and entertainment. Media and entertainment is, perpetuates what we would call the 7 deadly sins, right? And so, for example, media entertainment definitely perpetuates lust. Lust is a big thing in the matrix, or sex is, because, the more you're having sex and having orgasms, the more dope or dopamine that you're putting into your brain. And when you're flooding the brain with dopamine, you're short-circuiting your mind, really, when you think about it. And so you have to push the envelope to experience gratification, physical gratification, even more and more and more, until eventually you have no more what they call Kundalini, if you will, or will. This is the solar plexus, which is the seat of your will. And so, I talk about, how, for example, in media entertainment, how we're, infused with so much imagery about, sex. Like I was watching a commercial, it's a Reese's Pieces commercial, not Reese's Pieces, it's a Reese's Chocolate Bunny commercial for Easter. And they were playing the song Let's Get It On in the commercial. And, we know what Let's Get It On means. And Let's Get It On, it means let's have sex. And so I was watching another candy commercial, by the way, and the candy commercial was a Kit Kat commercial with Missy Elliott's song Work It. And so Work It is a song about actually, having sex with a man and maneuvering his penis, if you will, and actually riding his penis. So, but this is all in candy commercials, commercials, candy commercials are geared toward everyone, because everybody loves candy, but especially children. Children really love candy. But so you see that, that type of subliminal message is put into the unconscious mind of children. So consciously, they're just thinking, oh, I'm just looking at candy, I like candy. But unconsciously, that song is going to their temporal lobe, and they're not processing the fact that, hey, this is telling me to have sex. And so it creates within anybody watching this without an open third eye two yous. So one you is just the pious, feminine energy, the ego, is just focused on the candy itself. But the unconscious mind, which catches all information, is focusing on the sex, not just the candy, but also the sexual aspect of it as well. And so, it creates two yous. And so, people who are, asleep within the matrix, they don't necessarily understand how the brain works, if you will. Your brain, encompasses everything. The ego is only designed to interpret just a small amount of information, but the unconscious aspect of you that absorbs all information knows everything, and it absorbs everything. And so that's a part of you. So in a way, it's like, I think this is mentioned in Gnostic text, if you will, where you have to bring the inner to the outer and the outer to the inner. And so, when you get toward the ends of your incarnation, the unconscious mind will try to hide things from you so you don't actually do that, so you don't ascend. Because its whole purpose is to use you as a slave to get things from you. So your unconscious mind will cultivate a desire within your ego so it can have those things on the astral realm. So, for example, if your astral self wants a Lexus Jeep or something like that, it will restrict your ability to manifest that with money or time, or say you won't have the resources to manifest that at the atomic level, so it can have it. So you're just a slave here. This is a very much a slave construct, if you will. And so when you get beyond the point of being a slave and you start to get knowledge, you will see your unconscious mind start to whip you. And so this is what we call in Christian theology crucifixion. The New Age calls it an awakening, but I call it crucifixion. That's really what it is. And you will start to be crucified because you have knowledge, because it wants to beat the knowledge out of you so it can have you as a slave forever. It does not want you to be free. It does not want you to ascend or to become fully conscious, because once you become fully conscious and you have knowledge, you can manifest whatever, that you would want, your heart desires. And so it does not want that. It does not want you to ground your sacral, your solar plexus, the sun. It does not want you to ground that into physical reality, because if you do ground it into physical reality, God is not God anymore. You are God. The ego, the slave, becomes God. So, and when I talk in the book about the difference between the astral and the unconscious mind, or the ego and the astral self, which is the conscious and the unconscious mind, I talk about, the fact that the ego is the you, or the false you that you show everyone. And the unconscious is the you in your head that you would not want to show everybody. So say if you were, at your job, and, your boss says, you're not working up to par or something like that, you might cordially disagree. You may say to your boss, well, I'll do, I feel like I'm doing a great job, whatever the case is. Or you may say, I'll do better, or something like that. But in your unconscious mind, you may say something along the lines of, you can't even do my job. So since you can't do my job, I should do your job. And if I do your job, then maybe I could do my job. And so you would smart off, if you will, right? Hence the term smart. You wouldn't smart off and say something like that because of your reptilian brain. Because, as an ego, you say to yourself, I need this job, right? I have food and shelter and things like that I need to take care of. And so if I do that, that would jeopardize me having my job. And so I hold in, if you will, this aspect of myself. And this aspect of yourself that you hold in is the devil, or the veil of the ego. And so this is the part of you that you actually conceal. And so when you're concealing this aspect of yourself, it becomes a beast. And so this is the beast that's mentioned in Christian theology, or this is in Freudian psychology. It's called the id. And so the id is it's like a temperamental child, if you will. It's like, I want this, I want that, whatever the case is. And so the id wants to be able to express itself and to become limitless and to say what it wants to say to the boss. But the ego is designed to not do that. And so this is what I tell people is the difference between the ego and the astral. And so when you go to sleep at night, you can be who you are, who you wanted to be, if you will, when you were speaking to your boss as an ego. So you may say in the astral realm to your boss, I hate your guts, you're an effing lame, whatever the case is, because they are, right? So, you can say those things, if you will, as an astral body, but as an ego, you cannot, because you're actually dominated by your reptilian brain. And so, because the unconscious mind actually, if you will, owns you like a slave master, right? Owns you. It keeps you functioning at the reptilian brain, so you can always need it, or need God. So you're always taught to seek outside of yourself for needs, as opposed to seeking within yourself to manifest what you would, want and desire. So this is the difference between the two aspects, if you would, the difference between the ego and the astral self. And so, looking at that example of the, how lust is put into our consciousness, and how, we are bombarded with things that are sexual, and we cannot manifest those things because of the constructs of the matrix. So we're shunned for being whores of Babylon. We can't go to church and say, oh, I really got it on the other night with, even your husband. You can't even go, say, I got it on really well with my husband last night, or you can't say something along the lines of, I don't know, whatever. Like for example, there's a new, it's not really new, but there's a commercial. It's called, for Sling TV. It's a cable TV commercial, but they equate their product Sling with swinging. And so swinging is like a condoned adultery, right? It's an adultery. Usually, oftentimes, when you're swapping, partners in an orgy type fashion, I guess. And so, you say to yourself with this, well, this is something on TV, and so consciously, you're like, oh, that's tongue-in-cheek, that's funny. They're equating Sling TV with swinging. And they have Dr. Ruth and everything on there. But you can't go to church to the Bible study and say, oh, I swang last night and it was really wonderful. And so there's a conflict there within your consciousness, and you don't really recognize that this is really hurting your consciousness. This is really hurting you because it's creating within you two yous, right? So you're blamed at the end of your incarnation for being two and not one. But the handler, the people that facilitate this environment, purposely and methodically create two aspects of you. And so, so the way I like to demonstrate the fact that our minds are not ours is by, talking about the example if I took something and I flashed it in front of you and took it away. As an ego, you're just designed to process a very small amount of information, but the unconscious processes everything. So if I took something that's written on a piece of paper, instead if I said on it, hate yourself because you're black, right? Let's say I said that, and took it away, if you cannot recall what I showed you quickly, then you are a slave, and I am God. I own your mind. So I know that I told you to hate yourself because you're black, but you don't know that. And if you can't put yourself into a very deep state of meditation, or if you can't get yourself into a state of hypnosis, if you will, then you're not going to be able to gain that information. And so that means that I know something about you that you do not know, because the mind embodies everything. It's not just what you see from its limited ego, but it is the totality of existence itself. I think like Carl Jung, like psychologists and people like that, call it the collective unconscious mind. So you embody not just your small limited perspective of the ego, but you embody also the collective unconscious mind. And so this is very difficult for me to grasp as my third eye opened. Like for example, because in my book I go between the microcosm of my real life and the macrocosm of the world at large. So, like for example, race. When my consciousness was being bridged with my unconscious mind, I really experienced a lot of crucifixion during my awakening, because, as an ego, I really don't see race very much. I was taught like everybody else in the Matrix, race is not a big deal. I mean, we pretty much, although we may not look alike, we celebrate the same holidays, and we have the same religions, and we like the same stuff. There really is, it's a non-factor, as an ego. However, when I was waking up, I realized that within my consciousness, or my unconscious mind, I'm very racist, especially towards black people. And I am black. And so, when I tell people this, they oftentimes look at me like I'm insane. I would agree, but, that's a judgment. And this whole realm is all about judgments, the lowest taxonomy of knowledge, the what. So you're a racist, right? And you're unconscious. But when you look at a higher taxonomy of knowledge of how I came to be that within my unconscious, especially, racist toward black people, right? And then, how I became racist within my unconscious, how that came to be and why that is, you really start to determine that how that came to be, and it erases a lot of judgment within you. However, people will not be as sympathetic because people are bound by the matrix. They are not. This reality is for monkey minds, as I call them. And when I say monkey mind, I'm not talking about anything racial, but I'm saying someone who is dominated by their five senses. That's why the five-pointed star is integral to the matrix environment, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. That's a monkey mind, regardless of what race you are. So when you're a Jew, when you become a Jew, that means that you're a six-pointed star, not a five-pointed star, but a six-pointed star, meaning that your pineal gland has opened. You start to see, man, this is how I became racist and hating black people. And so in media in particular, when you look at media and how black people are portrayed in a very negative light. When you look at little shows like Love and Hip Hop and stuff like that, you see black people are very satanic in a way, in nature. And what do I mean by satanic? Satan is just the allegorical depiction of Satan in the Bible. And so Saturn is the Greek god of the material. So very materialistic, very satanic, about clothes and cars and fighting and, houses and things like that. They're all about the material. And so consciously you say, okay, it's just entertainment, but your unconscious mind processes that as black people are evil. And so my programming started not just, as these shows came about, but my programming to hate black people started when I was very young, because kids are in a theta brainwave frequency before the age of 7. And so I call theta the brainwave frequency of the Christ, because it is an unbiased state. It's a state of hypnosis where you can be programmed for anything, good or bad, whatever duality you would like the consciousness to experience. And so, before the age of 7, my mother would always straighten my hair. She would straighten my hair and she would say, your hair is your beauty. And so this was conditioning me to know that, my hair was ugly. Kinky hair was ugly. You had to have it straight, right? And so, didn't really think anything of it because I'm a kid, right? I don't realize that, because when you're put into this, when you're reborn or reincarnated, you're put back in without any knowledge. They purposely put you back in here without knowledge. So the thing is that if I came back into this construct with knowledge, then, I wouldn't really, I would know what the game is, but they don't want you to know the game here. That's the whole point of it. So, was basically subliminally programmed that I was ugly. The people in my family, many of my family members would call me white girl. And so, at first I thought to myself, white girl, maybe it's because of my lighter hue. Many people in my family are lighter hued. And so, I thought, well, maybe it's because of my lighter hue. And also I'm very, articulate. And so there's this stereotype that white people are very articulate. And so I said, well, maybe, it's because I'm articulate. I don't speak Gullah. And so in Charleston, Gullah is a mixture of, many people in Charleston speak Gullah. It's a mixture of English and African dialect. And so when the slaves came in through the seaports of Charleston, they spoke this language, if you will, to mesh the two. So the slave masters wouldn't really understand, what they were saying. And also, they couldn't really speak their native language. They weren't allowed to. They had to adopt certain things like Christianity and English and that type of thing. So, I don't really speak that dialect, and so I thought maybe that's why. As a kid, not really realizing that I was being conditioned to hate my race and hate myself. And then, too, the immense hatred for black men. In my unconscious, I have an immense hatred for black men, growing up. Although I love my dad, when he was drinking, he was a raging alcoholic. I had really bad experiences with you know, with black men. You know, I married a black man, and he turned out in so many ways to be like the black men in my family, you know, which, you know, stole, well, I wouldn't say he stole from me, but yeah, in a way he did. You know, stole money, and, you know, he didn't beat me, but, you know, many of the black men in my family stole from their wives, beat their wives, you know, that type of thing. And so, you know, it was, you know, just very difficult for me as a little kid. You know, I didn't really realize at the time that this was conditioning me. I was being conditioned to believe that black people are bad. The black men in my life were bad, and, you know, I was ugly. You know, my hair wasn't pretty. You know, my skin, you know, wasn't light enough. Like, I remember, like, on summer vacations, because we would always go to Myrtle Beach. And I remember my aunt one time, she said, "You're really getting black," you know, and I was like, well, you know, in hindsight, you know, I'm black, you know, and it's hot out here, and the sun makes your skin darker, right? but, you know, it was like, you need to preserve your lighter skin. And so, you know, in hindsight, I see how all of these things that were actually done to me actually created within the unconscious mind, not consciously, but within the unconscious mind, a hatred for black people. So I've given you a higher taxonomy of knowledge. So judgment is, you know what, Court, you're really cuckoo. You know, you know, you're cuckoo, you hate black people, and you're black. That's conscious, that's a monkey mind. And if you, you know, if you have that judgment, you can turn off my video right now. That's fine, because I'm only speaking to people who are smart. And I hate to be, you know, a dick about that. But really, you know, I'm only talking to conscious people here. So if you're an unconscious person and you're in that lower taxonomy of knowledge and you're a troll and you're about judging, then you don't need to respond to this, because you're not even on the level that I need you to be on to understand. See, you know, I'm in the ether and you are in what they call material or ma'at or whatever the case is. I'm not talking about people who are in the material or reptile-minded people where they can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. I'm about people who actually are about their pineal and actually understanding the material. And so, you know, within the matrix environment, black people in particular are targeted because of the melanin, because the melanin is connected to the pineal gland. So you're told to focus on the divine, which is the material, instead of the divinity that creates the divine, which is the pineal gland. And so the purpose is to destroy the pineal gland, so you do not manifest the material. You always have to seek outside of yourself, or seek God, the unconscious aspect of you, to actually meet your needs and, you know, your desires and things like that. So, you know, that's pretty much what my book is about, looking at the various constructs of the matrix, showing how they divide Adam and Eve, creating this astral self, or unconscious and conscious mind, or ego and astral self, giving you some examples of that, focusing on brainwave frequencies and how brainwave frequencies help you to understand that you do not own the mind here, and that you really don't have a choice here. So the lords of karma, they want you to think that you have a choice, and karma always brings the soul back. But really, to be honest with you, anything at the atomic level has manifested from the metaphysical. The divine doesn't happen. The divine only occurs from divinity. And so I'm doing like that hermetic thing, as above, so below. And so really, it happens above. You know, it happens above. And so anything at the atomic level, the ego is the atomic aspect. And so whatever you are doing as an ego has been programmed into you, into your unconscious, into your mind from the unconscious level, where you're not aware of it. I tend to think of it like, I remember a spiritual teacher once said, a false prophet of the matrix once said, you know, the one thing about false prophets, they mix a little bit of truth with lies. But this one prophet that I would look at, he said, which was true, he said that this reality is like going to a movie, right? They call it Maya, or dream. And so you're in a theater, so you're sitting in a theater and you see a fire on the screen. And so instead of you know, really thinking to yourself, how did that fire come to be on the screen? You take a bucket of water and you throw it at the screen. And so you're trying to get rid of the fire on the movie. Now, most people in the matrix are like that. You're sitting in a movie theater and you are trying to throw water at a screen. And so you are what we call insane. you are insane, because you know, you don't realize that at the atomic level that you are governed by what they call your higher self. I call it the devil, or the unconscious mind. So you're puppeteered. You know, you are not in control of it. And so, you know, because you're not in control of it, you know, you have to get into a slower brainwave frequency so you can determine how that came to be. Your only power is it's the how and the wow. The how and the wow. The how and the why. Sorry. You know, your only power is how it came to be. Your power is not throwing water at the screen to change something at the atomic level. And so it is your understanding that really gives you, that gives you, I guess, what you would call reformation in a way, and is your only way to escape, if you will, the slave system that makes devils, that makes beasts, if you will, and actually expose the people who actually, you know, put the soul, if you will, in a judgmental state. They purposely cultivate these devils and phantoms within a human being. And they torture you. And so I will talk about in subsequent videos, you know, how I've been subjected to, you know, relentless mind torture, physical torture. I've been subjected to gang stalking and things like that. Because whenever you are waking up in the matrix, you become what they call a threat, or you become what they call a divergent. And so they want you to continue playing your part. They do not want you stepping outside of your part, if you will. And so you become a target from everyone. It's not just, you know, people in everyday, you know, life. It's you know, everybody, you know, your family and so forth, because everyone is bound by this construct. All souls projected by the pineal gland that I have are programmed by one man. And so I'm going to talk in subsequent videos about the Antichrist. I'm going to talk about King James of Scotland, and so that is my handler from the astral realm, King James of Scotland. I'm going to talk about, you know, the Bible. The Bible is very important. I'm going to focus on the first 4 books of the Bible, particularly, and go through that. And so it shows that religion, especially, is important to dividing the mind and separating Adam and Eve, or what you would call Isis and Ra, or the conscious and unconscious mind. You know, most of the Bible is derived from ancient Egyptian mythology, which was relearned into Greek mythology. And so that's why Jesus is Zeus. That's why in Spanish they call Jesus Jesus, because that's Zeus. So they took all these mythologies and put them in a book so they could actually use the Bible as a metaphysical weapon. And there's so many different contradictions in the Bible that show that Jesus, the character Jesus in and of itself, is 2 people. He's 2 people. He's a conscious ego, and then he's an astral unconscious mind, which is the Father. So he's trying to ascend to the Father. His ego is trying to ascend to the Father. And so it goes to show that he's 2 people, and I look at scripture. And so, you know, within this video, it's important, I feel, to read along with me the scriptures, because, you know, things kind of bypass your temporal lobe. When you're reading something, you're really able to get through it and decipher it, and to really understand what someone is saying. So, you know, I'm going to talk about the Antichrist and King James of Scotland, and, you know, talk about my gang stalking experiences, my mind torture experiences, upload videos, because, you know, in the Matrix, it's very, you know, when you're waking up, it's very frightening and fearful. And so, you know, when people are literally targeting you because you're a bright light, it's kind of like being in the movie Gremlins. You know, when you're, you know, one thing about the Gremlins, the one thing they didn't like is light. They did not like light. They did not like knowledge. And so whenever you're walking around with knowledge, you become a threat. And so when you're exposing the various constructs of the Matrix and how they actually work to divide the mind, the jig is up. And so this whole reality that's projected through this pineal gland I have, this whole reality is based upon illusion. It's a trick. It's a Jedi mind trick, or what have you. You know, it's a, you know, trick. This is for tricks, literally. Horrors of Babylon, you know, type of thing. And so when I get into the Horror of Babylon, I will talk a lot about sex. So my book is a lot about sex. It talks about how, you know, whenever you're restricting consciousness, it affects the belly. The belly is your solar plexus. and so it affects your belly. And so I talk about in this book how I was sexually abused to rot out my kundalini, and you know, really conditioned and shown pornography at a very young age to rot out my sexual nature, if you will. So my will would be taken away. So that's the first way that they get rid of the will. They get rid of the will by through sexual genetic tampering. This is what we call the the genetic tampering. You know, it deals with melanin, but also, you know, it deals with the solar plexus. You know, you're supposed to bank your sexual nature. You know, your sexual nature is supposed to be within balance. It's, you know, I wouldn't say it's normal, but, you know, it's something that's expected when you're at the atomic level to copulate, right? But when you feel the need to copulate, you're not making a conscious decision to do it, and you are, you know, when people say they feel horny, that's why the devil is associated with horns. You know, being horny and the devil being associated with horns is a sexual energy that's connected to the sacral chakra, or the solar plexus, or the sun. And so I kind of expose the occult aspects of that, and the occult aspects of sex, and why sex is such a big thing in the demiurge, you know, this transhumanism, turning people into robots, basically. That's why you have sex toys and things like that. They want you to masturbate and rot out and flood your mind with a whole lot of dopamine. So you take out your ability to manifest, and you just become just a puppet, if you will, for the unconscious. And that's any vice of the demiurge. It's not just sex, but, you know, drugs, food, alcohol. These are all designed to flood the brain with dopamine. So you have to, when you come off of your high of that, you have to do more to gain a high for gratification, for physical gratification. And so that's something that the body naturally, you know, the consciousness naturally seeks to do, right? Because you're not just spiritual, you're earthly. And so the more you're flooding the brain artificially with dopamine, the more you are gravitating towards, you know, trying to push the envelope to being physically gratified. And so that's why when I look at sex in my book, you know, things like pornography,